What's going on, everybody? Pete here at Spawn Fly Fish. And before we get started, if you do us a favor, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and we will get rocking on this fly. This is going to be a little caddis larva slash almost wants to be a pupa type deal. And so in the vise, I've got the Firehole 523. This is a size 14. For the bead, we've got the Spawn football bead, size 5.5 millimeter, color gold. Now I'm going to use some non-lead .020 just to get 8-9 wraps on there so that I can secure that bead into place and not have to worry about it moving. And then of course the added benefit of a little extra weight, which doesn't hurt. So there's the front cut. I'm going to use the inside of my wire cutting scissor, just round that over, and I'll do the same on the back. And the main thing here is you don't want to use so many wraps of weighted wire that you get back here and start to interfere with the hook gap there. So snug that up into the back end of that bead, main portion of the bead there, the bulk being underneath, so that this hook will keel properly. And for some thread here, got some UniThread, Camel 6/0. Just get that started and we will trim the tag end out. So, and now using some 45-degree angle wraps, I'm going to come up, make sure that bead is where I want it before we cinch all this down, and then 45-degree angle wrap back, and we'll do that one more time up, and put some wraps right behind that bead for a second, and then push there, and 45-degree angle wraps back. Now we can add some wraps that go more right between those weighted wire wraps. And just make sure one more time there. And now it's really going to be tucked in there. All right. So now to give this caddis its little larval body peeping effect, if you will, I've got some vinyl rib. This is Chartreuse, size Midge, and since this is going to ride hook point up, I'm going to want this body to come out and kind of rise past that curve. So I'll tie it with the curve, if you will. You see how it's got a naturally built-in curve there, just you let it follow the hook. And we'll manage the length and distance of that at the end here. So get it right about there. You can begin to make it, bend over all the way if you want, or just stick right there. I'm happy with it right there. And I'm going to cut this vinyl rib so that it's going to match up right where our last wraps of that weighted wire were, right around there, so that it stays nice and even for our underbody here. All right. So at this point, I'm going to grab some Peacock, and this is green Peacock. This is a nature spirit, and I'm going to tie this in like so, and all the way back. I've got 3 strands or hurls of this green Peacock here. Trim out these tags, and at this point I will just take these all 3, bring them up together, and start to gently twist them and make one hurl, essentially, that is much fuller and a little bit stronger. Just going to use a couple wraps here around where that vinyl rib comes out, and this is going to emulate some of the thorax slash legs and what have you, just poking out of the casing that is housing this little larva. Trim out those peacock butts and finish tying down all the way to the wire. Let's add another wrap there. All right. At this point, let's go ahead and grab a piece of Peccary. And if you watched the last video, I did use Peccary in that one. And then I love this stuff, especially for casings and little larval patterns like this. But you can see how it's going to go from brown to white to brown to white. And we want to incorporate as much of that difference as we can. So we're going to tie this in so that we start roughly on the mid section of that first brown section there. So looks pretty good. And again, tie it all the way in until you've reached right about the back of that weighted wire. On the name of keeping that underbody as even as we can for now. And now one more thing to tie in, and that is going to be a piece of ultra wire. Size is Brassie, and for this one I'm going to use Chartreuse. And the reason being, when it's used as a rib between this peccary, it's going to really look like the bulging body or flesh that's inside of the casing. So why not use it? And then it also, I mean, Chartreuse, can't go wrong. So there we go. Get that tied in, and we can begin wrapping this sucker up. Nothing to it. It's about as simple as they get. All right. So now for that first wrap of peccary, I'm going to make sure this wire comes forward, and I want this first wrap to go right on in behind that. And now I can pull it back. And what this is going to do is give that wire a direction to go, and it won't have to search for a space between these wraps. It's already there. Just has to follow them up. So for this, I am intentionally not doing touching wraps. I want that ribbing wire to really pop and stand out. And we're going to use some resin and coat this whole thing anyway, so it'll look, you know, very fleshy sitting there between these wraps of peccary. And almost done here. And this one you could easily turn into a full pupa by simply tying in a feather here at the back and doing a soft hackle type fly. Would work great. But for this, we're just going simple, fast, got to get some flies and go fishing kind of deal. Trim that tag end of peccary out, a couple more wraps to clean it up, and now we're ready for that rib. And so find that first groove, and you see we already put that in there, so don't even have to look for it, it's just there. Just take your time, check in there, make sure you're following the gaps, all those wraps of peccary. The only thing that can get you in trouble here, honestly, is wrapping too fast and not checking to see that it's going in between. So if you can do that, take a little time, watch what you're doing. Next thing you know, catching more fish, better looking flies. People are jealous. They always want to check in your fly box. It's a good day. All right, I'm going to trim that wire out. I'm just going to use my thumb and kind of crimp it down, go with those thread wraps, and you can see there that'll leave me a little angle to catch, and then I can continue wrapping that down. Alright, let's see what this guy looks like. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're going to do 2 whip finishes here. And then we will be ready for some resin. There we go. And trim that out. And one more thing we need to do real quickly before we get the resin on here, and I'll try to stay in focus for you. So remember, we've got this little larval body coming out here. So use a lighter. Just ever so carefully start melting that back until you get the distance you want for that larval body. And that looks pretty good. Now you have a little bit more of a realistic head. And now I'll put it back in. And we will get out some Loon. This is UV clear fly finish in thin. And all we're going to do is start getting some of this on, and as we do, just use the tip of the applicator here, smooth it out, and just as thin as you can go on there to make sure everything's just coated. We don't want a bunch of extra resin running around, just enough. And try not to mat down all of the Peacock fibers up here if you can. And once we get it where it looks pretty good, make sure that thread gets a nice coating there. Looks pretty good. Get out your trusty torch. This one happens to be Loon. And light it up, and you can see what's happening to that vinyl rib when it sees that UV. So imagine this moving through the water column. It's gonna blink at them. They're gonna see this thing. Go bead in front to get it weight, boom, down where the fish are. Good start. Then you got a chartreuse body, chartreuse rib, natural looking casing from the peccary, and just a little bit of dance coming from that peacock. Ooh, we can't miss. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, once again, please hit like and subscribe, and we will see you guys on the water.